For a long time, I wasn't sure I wanted to tell this story. Not because I've forgotten it, but because I lived it. And when you live through something that changes everything, there comes a point where you have to decide whether you're going to keep carrying it alone or just tell the truth about what's happened. My name is Robin, and this is The Girl in Ashes. When I started talking about this podcast about 6 months ago, I had no idea the layers that I would unravel as I was diving into preparing for this. At first, I thought I was launching a podcast, and then I realized it was so much more than that. Instead, I found myself revisiting memories and asking hard questions and discovering connections I never noticed that were there before. And when life kind of drops something into your spirit and then everything seems to align, it kind of feels like you should do it. And everything around this started aligning in a way that I never expected. And so one of the themes of this podcast is rebuilding beautifully. And I started thinking about that. You can't really rebuild or understand the rebuilding process until you understand the foundation of which someone was built. And so before I talk about grief, before I talk about questions, before I talk about faith struggles, loss, and all of that, let me talk about one of my main building blocks. And that would be my best friend and the most important person probably in my life. And that is my dad. So it's kind of funny when we think about how our life journey can align us in so many different ways. And one of those things is this very dream that's coming true right now. When we talk about one of the building blocks of who I am, let's talk about a great man who believed in rebuilding. The other day, I went back to my home church, which we'll learn more about later in this podcast, and I was telling someone a story about him. My dad, he was one who saw something broken that no one had faith in anymore and said, I think we can fix this, and we can probably fix it better than it started. And one of those things was the very church that he ministered. He was a minister and a contractor, and his whole life was centered around rebuilding the broken, fixing what other people had given up on, and doing his best to leave an impact in ways that no one else understood or had a vision for. And when he had first come into ministry and he was seeking his first church, I shared this story with a group of people the other day. He had walked upon a building that was rubble, busted out windows, graffiti, given up on, an empty shell, nothing of value. And he looked at it and said, I think this one is for me. And so he, of course, called my papa. They talked about it. They prayed about it. And that was one of the pivotal moments of his life where he took rubble or ashes and saw the beauty in it. He took over that facility. He rebuilt, he restructured, and in a short amount of time, he opened the doors. Now, in this rebuilding process of something that seems like a story that we may not can relate to just yet, he got it ready to go. He opened the doors and he started a vision and a passion with my mother, my older sister, and an elderly couple who said, we'll support you. And in the midst of that, it was just him, his guitar, and a few clapping hands on a squeaky floor, starting a service and starting ministry that he had wanted to do and felt called to for years. Now, that is just one of the pivotal moments that I have uncovered while digging through layers of starting this podcast to talk about rebuilding beautifully. And it was kind of a pivotal moment, and I may be emotional through this podcast because it is kind of parallel to where I'm at. And I may not be looking at a structure of rubble. But oftentimes I'm looking in the mirror at a person who may be a little broken. And I'm standing here or sitting here today saying, you know what, we could probably fix it. It may be better than it's ever been before. Now, that's not the only layer that we talk about here. I have more layers to that. One of my greatest memories of the man, the legend, is the fact that he would take me to school every day. He would drive me to school almost every day when I was in elementary school. And I'll be completely honest with you, I am not a morning person. I never have been. I still am not. Mornings is not my jam. I can party with you all night, but get me up in the crack of dawn and I am not the happiest person. And when I was a kid, I was very grouchy. I feel like I've gotten a little bit better about it, but some friends may beg to differ. So I was very grouchy as a little kid, getting up in the morning, having to go to school. And my dad would get up. He was ready to start his day. He would get up before everybody else. He would make himself a little cereal or something. He didn't love breakfast, but he knew he had to have something. And then he'd get his work truck ready, and I would go and get my backpack, and he'd make sure I had everything with me, and I'd climb in the passenger seat, and I'd have this grouchy attitude, this pouty little kid in the passenger seat. I don't want to go to school. Why do I have to do this? I'm tired. And he would climb up in that truck, and I guarantee he was tired as well. He was a hardworking man. And we would get down the road, and almost on a daily basis, he would make up songs about whatever he found on our journey up the street to my elementary school to crack me out of my attitude. Those would often consist of singing about squirrels, singing about the leaf that's blowing by, what the weather may be that day, and what I may encounter on the playground later. So he would sing his songs, make up these stories, and get me to crack a smile or a laugh before I started my day, because heavens, nobody at the school needed to see my grouchy attitude. And he would sing his songs and make me laugh and break me out of my morning attitude, take me to school, and he wouldn't just drop me off. He would get out, walk me into the school, because I was his precious baby girl. I could not just be walking into the school by myself. Now, this could be a part of a foundation of my princess attitude, but we're not going to go there just yet. And so he was always creative and funny and trying to figure out how to fix problems all the time, whether it was, of course, rebuilding or fixing attitudes from his baby girl who didn't want to be up at the crack of dawn to go to school. And he was always just the funniest person. Not only that, but there's one time that I sat around and I had gotten a wig for a play, and we had gotten the wig in the mail, and I was concerned about it. I'm like, oh, this is not exactly what I ordered. And so in just a few moments, you would find him wearing that wig and posing for a picture just to make me laugh. He was the funniest person. He made me laugh all the time, and truly no one else can match it. He always had me laughing and cracking up, and so many people didn't understand his humor. And it was so many times that you would sit around and he would crack jokes with somebody, but he was kind of dry and sarcastic, or he would make it come across like he's being serious. And nobody would understand it. People would look at him and go, oh, okay. And I'm like laughing in the corner somewhere. And I just always thought, that is so sad. People are not understanding that he is hilarious. Like, what are we talking about? And so I have realized that I have inherited that. A lot of times my humor can be very sarcastic and dry, and people get offended, and I don't even know I'm offending them. One time my mother had told me, well, more than once, my mother had told me on various occasions, when we made you, it was a concentrated dose. She thought I was so much like my father, it was ridiculous, and honestly, it would get on her nerves. She would get kind of sick of how we were so similar. It's kind of an interesting dynamic that we had in the household, because my dad and I were very similar. The passions that we had were similar. I often would go outside. I never forget when I was 7, what I wanted for Christmas the most was a tool belt, because I wanted to wear a tool belt like Dad. Dad had a tool belt he wore all the time. He was always working, and he's out there sweating, building things in the yard, fixing the roof, rebuilding something at the house after he'd be working his 12-hour shifts. And I'm like, I need a tool belt too. I want to be like Dad. So I did. When I was 7 years old, I got a pink tool belt. It was the cutest thing. Dad thought it was just so ridiculous that I wanted a pink tool belt, because it's one thing to want a tool belt, but an all pink one, that is so ridiculous. And so I did. I wore it with pride. I put it on. I said, this is heavy. I didn't realize it. He's like, yeah, they're heavy. You know, my tool belt's like 50 pounds. I have to carry it around all the time for you. And he would say for me, because he was working hard for our family. And, but I just wanted to be like him. I wanted to care for people like him. I wanted to build things like him. I wanted to have ministry like him. And so he was my best friend through and through. And aside from his hardworking and his humor and being the most amazing person, he was also a pastor. And his story was a little bit different. You know, he started off being raised Baptist, and then he came in contact with Pentecost through a miraculous healing of his nephew. And it changed his life to a different direction. And I have to say that one thing is for sure, that through all of it, he raised me to have strong faith, to have the outlook of no is not a no, no is a redirection to figure it out. And I have carried that forever. I have found in my life multiple times that statement is so true. No is not a no when it comes to your goals and aspirations. It is a redirection. And sometimes, and even in this moment saying it, we have to realize that God feels the same way, that no is not a no, it's a redirection. Ugh, that's hard to accept. I have spent my life seeing miracles that make no sense. I have stood by his side in ministry. I have worked in so many aspects of the church. I supported him in every way. I wanted to be someone to be proud of. And through my own experience in life, I've seen things that make no sense medically, that don't make sense scientifically, real life miracles that have taken place, people who are restored right before your eyes, and things that have just been unexplainable and impactful in my life. I've seen it. I've been there. I've been there when he walked into a room of someone he did not know. He prayed for them, and God moved on the scene, and those people came back from what seemed like an endless possibility, an end road for them. And they came back from it by the power of God through his prayer. Now, nobody's perfect, but I know that man, my dad, my best friend, he lived the best that he could. He lived as close to the Word of God that he could. And there were daily, numerous times I heard him pray. I heard him steal away, like lock himself in a room and pray and work on messages and seek God for individuals and go to hospitals and visit the sick and give to the poor and fix things for people who didn't have and pick up pieces for family members and raise nephews and nieces that their parents had passed away, and he's taken on the role the best he knew how, and do all of these things. And if he said a prayer for you, it was going to touch the ears of the heavens. An amazing man. And then we come to like a pivotal moment here in this story of this amazing man who finds himself in a crossroads of struggling to hold the faith in a mound of turmoil. Now, I tell him all the time he should have written a book. And maybe this is my way of kind of taking the reins to try to help his story be cast out there in some way, shape, or form. But of course, we're going to take a lot of turns in this adventure. But when it comes to him, he had faced a lot throughout his entire life. It was like it was a mark on him to have loss and suffering from losing his brother, his sister, his younger brother, his parents, people he loved, his in-laws, his brother-in-law. It was one hit after another, after another. And every single time I watched that man grieve in his own ashes, stand up, dust himself off, and say, I have so much more to live for. Now, talking on that aspect, it wasn't only outside sources that were a struggle. He suffered from a tremendous heart attack. One of the biggest moments in my life, the impactful moments that I can share that maybe someone has experienced that leads to these ashes that I'm talking about, is his heart attack. My dad had a massive heart attack, and in that process, he died on the table 3 times. One of those moments, it was a Sunday morning. He was getting ready to have open heart surgery. My sister and I, we were headed to the church. We were going to keep the church running even though Dad was in the hospital. It was my biggest goal to make sure everything ran perfectly, that he didn't have to stress about or think about anything, that his sheep were taken care of, that the building was taken care of, that it was my desire to make sure that he didn't have to worry about it. So it was Sunday morning. I'll never forget it. We were riding to church. We were going to take this service over, and they called and they said, you need to come now. So I panicked, we redirected, and I went to the hospital. When I got there, they let me go back. Dad had already suffered a moment of dying on the table, and they had him flipped upside down on a flat table to try to get him back. They had gotten him back. They allowed me to come see him while he was there. And I stood by his table and I held his hand and I said, Dad, you're going to be okay. And he's like, it's not okay. And I said, you are going to be okay. It is not your time. And he looked at me, flipped upside down on a flat table, and he said, I admire your faith. Don't ever lose it. And know that I love you. And I walked out of that room and I said, this can't be it. This can't be it. And that is one of the many miracles that I got to see. In a situation that looked like that was the end, it wasn't. And he came out of it. And he came home and he healed just like any other human. And he went through suffering and emotional distress just like anybody else who's ever had to face such situations as open heart surgery. But he picked up the pieces and in a few months got back behind the pulpit and still ministered. Strength, undeniable strength. And then beyond that, he started losing his vision and had to get shots in his eyes and had kidney failure and struggles. And no matter what, he got up. He got up. He was resilient, strong. There was no broken down ashes or destruction that would take him down or stop him. That was my best friend. That was the person I wanted to be like. That's the person I wanted to mimic. And we get to the point of, how did I end up where I'm at right now? What makes me want to start this podcast? What is this really about? Well, My dad was going through a great grieving process himself. My mom had passed away, which we'll talk about later. And it was just he and I. And in that amount of time where I was solely focused on making sure he was okay, he was struggling and suffering. And every night I heard him practically beg God to heal him, to give him comfort, to let him sleep. It was the first time in my life that I watched this strong, hardworking horse of a man humble before God and say, please. In a house in the middle of the night at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm the only other ears that hears it. In my room, I sat alone, connected to his, listening to him behind the closed doors. Say, God, all I want is for this suffering to become a miracle so I can reach the masses and prove to them that you are the God of miracles. And you have to think in that moment what it must feel like to sit on the other side of that wall and hear the person that you love the most, your best friend, talk to the only person you've been raised to trust and say, I want to take this and be a martyr for you. My best friend, my dad, a great man of God, passed away March of 2024. The very miracle that he believed, the very miracle that he begged for night after night, what we wanted, what I wanted, that didn't happen. And so many people, you can listen to podcasts, recordings, go and sit with a counselor in a church, and they will tell you what you've always heard. If you are listening to me today and you've experienced great grief, and you've sat there and you said, God, I believe in you. I do not understand you right now. And you go seek counseling, they're going to tell you the miracle did take place. He's whole. It's great. This is the best answer that could have been. He's better off than we are. God had a plan. I'm not here to give you those lines today. We're healing together. All of those statements may very well be true in some way, shape, or form. But that doesn't mean that I'm not sitting here saying, I'm angry. I don't understand. And as I've watched this trajectory for 2 years, what good has come out of this result? So I would say that is where the Girl in Ashes began. That was the moment that the entire structure of which my life was built in, my best friend, the strongest man I ever knew, the person who had the answers, the person who would look at me and say, here's what I've been thinking in the middle of the night. The person who sat up with me and watched Family Feud religiously and would tell me I was really good at it, that we should go on the show. The person that was my pastor, my mentor, has now exited this world. Now what? Now what do I do? My identity was built around wanting to be like him, wanting to make sure he was happy with me, following in those footsteps of success. And now I'm just sitting here angry, irritated, confused, trying to accept the regular statements of, oh, he's better off. It's all for the best. You'll figure it out. It'll get better. Time heals. Yeah. All okay. Okay, I'll take it. But I came to this point in my life where I thought, I should talk about this. You know why I should talk about this is because I guarantee somebody who is listening to this has experienced this very moment. You have sat around and experienced a tremendous loss, and it doesn't have to be a father. It could be your spouse, your child, your grandmother. It could be your dog that you've had for 20 years. It doesn't matter what the magnitude is or what anybody else's opinion is. Loss is loss. And it changes you forever. And we are not exempt. There is not one person that is exempt from experiencing it. So what do we do? How do we heal? Do we heal by ignoring it? Which is, I can tell you, that's what I've been doing. And in fact, trying to build these episodes, I find myself realizing that my brain has purposely blocked out memories so I didn't have to feel the emotion. I had to sit at my computer and think a long time about what is something my father used to say to me all the time. That's crazy. This was my closest person, a mirror to who I was. The person who understood my humor, the person who understood my passions, the person who would listen to me in the wee hours of the night, the person who made me laugh. And I found myself studying for these episodes and sitting here going, what did he say to me all the time? What are some funny memories? Our brain rewires every time we suffer a big loss. It recreates patterns so that we don't have to deal with it. But is that the best way to heal? Are we healing or are we avoiding? There are so many parallels when I started diving into this. It is insane. I kind of laughed to myself because when we talk about my father, my dad, my best friend, right? We talk about somebody who, of course, we shared the story with rebuilding the church. He found ashes, rubble, brokenness, and said, you know what, that's where I want to put my ministry. He, when I was working with him in construction, we walked into houses that had no floors, just dirt. And he would look at the customer and go, I could fix it. There was always a new adventure. There was always the wee hour of the morning. Here's what I've been thinking. Tell me what you think about this. And now he was asking my opinion, but he really didn't care about it. He just wanted to, have a sounding board. Because that man, when he decided something, it was pretty much decided, just be a sounding board, right? And it was always something new, some new adventure. I think I'm going to open a warehouse. I think I'm going to just start a window business. I think that we should build a new church. I think always something. And so I was diving through this and I'm like, okay, well, I feel like I am the broken building for the past 2 years. And I'm like, you know what? Let me start a jewelry business. You know what? I think I'm going to dive into podcasting. I think that I can help people. And that's what I really want to do. I want to help people. I want my own version of ministry. I want my own version of healing together. Nobody's perfect. And you can give me the book pages, sayings all day long, and it's not going to make anything perfect. But here we are, trying to rebuild. And rebuilding beautifully, might I add, in sackcloth and ashes. Now, I'm going to give this little tidbit at the end of where we're wrapping this up. Hopefully we have enough content for this, but as I'm wrapping this up, I want to explain my title for those of you who do not know. If you have never read the scriptures before, or maybe you have or haven't, you will find what it means to be in ashes every time was representation of grief. When someone in the Bible would go through great grief, they would sit down in sackcloth and ashes to mourn for approximately 7 days. And it was so that everyone who walked by knew they were in grief. It was a really powerful thing. It was a powerful visual. If you think about it, it was a powerful moment. It's saying, hey, I'm super grieving right now. And so when I thought about the title, I'm like, wow, that's pretty accurate. I have been super grieving for years. And you may have listened to this whole entire thing, and you thought, wow, that's a crazy story, or that's hard, or whatever the case may be, and think that this is where it began. But my questions of my faith, my struggles, my ashes did not begin the day my dad passed. It began much earlier than that. As we wrap up episode 1 of Who is the Girl in the Ashes, I just want to leave this part with you. My dad's story did change me forever. His faith, his strength, and his final chapter. All of it left its mark on who I am today. But the truth is, losing my dad wasn't actually where the story began. It wasn't where the ashes began. It wasn't when the building started to burn. Before I was fighting to keep my dad alive and believing that his miracle was coming, I was fighting to keep my mom alive. And that's the story I really don't know that I'm ready to share. Maybe that's where we'll start next episode. And be prepared, because that is a bigger avoidance than the story of my father. Until then, remember that even in your ashes, God is still wanting to rebuild you beautifully. And even though our rubble looks really big and messy right now, piece by piece, we can heal together. I look forward to seeing you next week. If someone were to ask you where you are in life right now and what does it look like, how would you describe it? If you were really honest, internally, if the inside of your soul was a building, what would it look like? Do you find areas that have cracks, broken windows? Is there graffiti on the walls? Has part of your foundation broken? When you look at the building that is who you are, how many patches are there? Do you want it to look better? How do you want that house to look? That's where I'm at. My house has been broken for a long time, but I want it to be better. Walk with me as we rebuild piece by piece what caused this destruction, and how on earth are we going to rebuild it better than before?